The galaxy is a vast place full of countless stars, planets, and life forms. Some of these life forms live in comfort, surrounded by advanced technology and endless resources. Others struggle to survive on worlds that are harsh, even deadly. Among these struggling civilizations was one known as the Villari Collective. They had once been a thriving federation, living peacefully for generations. Their cities floated among the clouds of their planets, and their people communicated through songs, gestures, and thought. But now that peace was gone. A deadly biological weapon had been unleashed across their homeworlds. It spread faster than anything they had ever seen. Entire cities fell silent overnight. Families disappeared, leaving only empty homes behind. The Villari tried everything they could. They used their best scientists, their most advanced medicine, and their strongest defenses, but nothing worked. Every attempt to stop the infection failed. The virus was relentless, moving through their population like a shadow that refused to vanish. As despair grew, the leaders of the Villari knew they had to make a decision. They had one final option, a call for help to the rest of the galaxy. It was a desperate plea. They sent out a signal, broadcasting their situation to every corner of space. Their message was simple but urgent. "We are dying. We need help." The signal traveled for light years, crossing star systems, nebulae, and asteroid belts, but almost everyone ignored it. Many civilizations had heard the tales of the Villari and their sudden tragic collapse. They didn't want to take the risk. They feared contamination. Some saw the Villari situation as a warning rather than a plea, a danger to be avoided, not solved. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The Villari waited in silence, hoping that someone, anyone, would answer. Their fear grew with each passing day. Food supplies were running low, hospitals were overwhelmed, and even their communication networks were starting to fail. The once vibrant cities were now ghost towns. In the streets, the few survivors wandered, confused and exhausted, searching for news or guidance. But there was none. Then, unexpectedly, a response arrived. It came from a small, overlooked planet called Earth. Most of the galaxy considered Earth a dangerous place. Its environment was harsh, filled with predators, diseases, and natural disasters. It was home to humans, beings that many described as reckless and violent. Stories of humans surviving wars, deadly plagues, and extreme conditions had traveled across space, giving them a reputation both feared and respected. The Villari were stunned. Earth's humans were known as Deathworlders, a name given not because they were killers, but because they had evolved to survive conditions that would kill almost anyone else. Their planet was unforgiving, and yet they thrived. Now these humans were offering help. The message from Earth was clear and direct. A group of humans, organized as part of a global effort, promised to assist the Villari. They didn't ask for anything in return. They didn't warn about the risks. They simply stated that they had the knowledge, the technology, and the will to try. The Villari Council debated the offer. Many were nervous. Humans were unpredictable, often acting without warning or logic. They had a history of conquering and fighting, and the Villari weren't sure if these so-called Deathworlders could be trusted. Some feared that letting humans in could make the situation worse, but as they weighed their options, hope began to outweigh fear. The humans were their only chance. When the first human ships arrived, the Villari were shocked. The ships were not elegant or smooth like their own starcraft. They were functional, armored, and heavily reinforced. The humans themselves were dressed in protective gear and carried equipment that looked both strange and frightening. But despite the intimidating appearance, there was an unmistakable air of purpose about them. The humans moved quickly and efficiently. They established temporary medical stations, deployed drones to clean contaminated areas, and began analyzing the virus. They worked without complaint, even in conditions that were dangerous and unfamiliar. Unlike the Villari, who were still weakened and frightened, the humans seemed almost energized by the challenge. Their determination was infectious, and slowly, the Villari began to feel a sense of hope that had been missing for months. One of the Villari elders watched as a human medic moved through a quarantined district, tending to the sick. The medic was covered in protective clothing, yet the elder could see the effort and care in every movement. The humans were not trying to dominate or control. They were here to help. And in that moment, the Villari realized that perhaps the legends about humans were only half true. Yes, they were dangerous and resilient, But they were also capable of compassion and sacrifice in ways the Valari had not expected. As the humans worked, the Valari began to document their methods. They observed how the humans treated the infected, how they managed supplies, and how they adapted to unexpected problems. There was a simplicity and practicality to human solutions that the Valari had never seen before. They did not rely on complex machinery or perfect conditions. They relied on creativity, persistence, and a refusal to give up. Meanwhile, the humans faced challenges of their own. The virus was unpredictable, and every day brought new obstacles. Some humans became infected during their work, and yet they did not stop. When given the option to retreat or quarantine themselves, they chose to continue helping. The Valari watched in awe as humans risked their own lives to save others. Among the humans, there was no sense of superiority. They did not look down on the Valari for their weakness or for the mistakes they had made in trying to stop the virus. Instead, they treated every Valari patient as equal, showing patience and kindness even when the situation was overwhelming. This attitude created a bridge between the two species, a connection built on trust and shared purpose. Over the weeks, the Valari began to see small successes. The human methods slowed the virus, reduced fatalities, and restored some of the devastated areas. Children returned to school, families began to communicate again, and the cities slowly started to feel alive. For the first time in months, the Valari dared to imagine a future where their civilization could survive. It was during this time that the Valari learned something unexpected about the humans. They did not ask for praise or recognition. They did not seek glory or reward. Their motivation was simple. They acted because it was the right thing to do. They had survived harsh worlds, wars, and disasters, and through it all they had developed a deep understanding of the value of life. To them, no species was too small or too weak to deserve help. The Valari began to share stories about humans with their own people. Parents told their children about the brave beings who had crossed light years to save a civilization on the brink of extinction. Artists painted murals of humans working side by side with Valari healers. Musicians composed songs that captured the rhythm of human determination. In these stories and artworks, the humans became more than just saviors. They became symbols of resilience, courage, and hope. And yet, despite the growing admiration, the humans remained practical and focused. They knew their work was far from over. They were here to solve a problem, not to be celebrated. Every day brought new challenges, new infections, and new complications. But they faced each one without hesitation, proving to the Valari that determination could overcome fear, and action could overcome despair. By the end of the first part of this story, the Valari had learned something they would never forget. The galaxy was vast, and many civilizations would choose inaction over risk. But somewhere in the dark reaches of space there were beings who would answer a cry for help, not for reward, but because it was needed. And these beings, these Deathworlders from Earth, had changed the course of the Valari civilization forever. The Valari looked to the stars with renewed hope. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but now they had allies who understood survival, courage, and sacrifice. The first contact had been made. The humans had arrived, and for the Valari the future no longer seemed so bleak. When the humans arrived on the Valari homeworld, the first thing the aliens noticed was how different they were from any being they had seen before. The humans were not graceful or elegant like the Valari, who moved with careful precision, their gestures flowing like music. Humans were loud, clumsy at times, and their movements seemed awkward. But there was something about them that immediately caught the Valari's attention. Every action the humans took was purposeful. Even when they tripped over uneven ground or bumped into obstacles, they got back up quickly, refocused, and continued working. There was a raw determination in the way they moved, a determination that no one could ignore. The Valari had heard stories about humans before, but nothing could have prepared them for the sight of these beings working in their cities. The streets, once empty and silent, were now full of movement. Human engineers and medics rushed to the areas most affected by the virus, setting up makeshift hospitals, purification stations, and quarantine zones. They didn't wait for permission to act. If a district needed help, the humans went there immediately, even when the Valari cautioned them about the dangers. One of the Valari elders observed them from a high balcony, watching as a group of humans carried crates of medical supplies through the city. The crates were heavy, yet the humans worked together without complaint. They lifted, carried, and passed items with a teamwork that was almost choreographed yet entirely natural. It was different from the Valari approach, which often relied on intricate technology and precise planning. The humans seemed to trust their instincts more than any system or machine, and somehow it worked. The humans also spoke to the Valari in a way that was unexpected. They didn't use complicated scientific jargon or technical terms that required translation. Instead, they used simple words, gestures, and demonstrations to communicate. They showed the Valari how to prepare the medicine, how to apply treatments, and how to handle the sick safely. The Valari were amazed at how quickly they could understand and apply human methods. In a few days, the Valari healers who had struggled for months began to feel hope again. Despite their efficiency, the humans were not without challenges. The virus that had ravaged the Valari was unpredictable. Some areas were worse than others, and no matter how careful the humans were, they faced exposure. A few of them became ill, showing symptoms similar to those of the Valari. But even when sickness struck, the humans did not stop. They continued working, their dedication never wavering. When the Valari offered to take the sick humans back to the ships for safety, they refused. They insisted on staying, insisting that the Valari people could not be abandoned. This behavior shocked the Valari. They had never seen a species put the lives of strangers above their own safety so willingly. The concept was almost foreign to them. Many Valari had spent their lives trying to survive through rules, technology, and careful planning. Humans, on the other hand, relied on courage, instinct, and a sense of responsibility to others. The Valari began to wonder if this was why humans had survived the harsh world they came from. Their planet was a place of constant danger, where only the adaptable and determined could thrive. It made sense that humans would approach problems with both fearlessness and compassion. As days passed, the humans started to make visible progress. The virus, which had seemed unstoppable, began to slow in its spread. Hospitals that had been overwhelmed were now organized, and patients received treatment faster than ever before. Streets that had been abandoned were slowly repopulated as families ventured out, seeing the humans work tirelessly to restore their communities. Children watched the humans with curiosity and awe, learning quickly from their methods and mimicking their actions in play. One of the most striking things the Valari noticed was how humans treated each other. Even when exhausted or in pain, they never argued over resources or took credit for the work. Instead, they worked together, encouraged one another, and shared both the successes and the burdens. It was a kind of teamwork that the Valari had never experienced. Among their own kind, cooperation often depended on rank, status, or skill. Humans, by contrast, seemed to respect the effort itself, no matter who contributed it. In the evenings, when the human teams returned to their temporary shelters, they did not isolate themselves. They gathered together, sharing food, stories, and laughter. The Valari watched these gatherings from a distance, noting how the humans found joy even amid the crisis. It was a reminder that survival was not just about fighting disease. It was about preserving the spirit. The Valari had spent so long focused on survival that they had almost forgotten how important hope and connection were. Watching the humans, they realized that courage alone was not enough. The human ability to inspire and lift others was just as important. The Valari began to participate more actively alongside the humans. At first, they were hesitant, afraid of making mistakes or worsening the situation. But the humans treated mistakes as learning opportunities. They corrected gently, demonstrated again, and encouraged perseverance. The Valari discovered that collaboration with humans was different from any other interaction they had ever experienced. There was no judgment, only shared effort toward a common goal. As the humans worked, they also taught the Valari about resilience in a way that words alone could not convey. The humans had survived their own deadly plagues, wars, and natural disasters, and they carried that experience into every action they took. When a new complication arose, a mutated strain of the virus or a breakdown in the quarantine system, the humans did not panic. They adapted quickly, improvising solutions with whatever resources were available. Their calm determination reassured the Valari that even the most hopeless situations could be managed with patience, creativity, and teamwork. One day, the humans uncovered a hidden problem. Several districts had been exposed to the virus for longer than others. The residents were frightened, many of them weak and sick. The humans divided into small teams and went into the areas, working tirelessly to administer medicine and comfort the patients. They spoke softly to the Valari people, holding hands, offering reassurance, and encouraging them to fight through the fear. The Valari, who had long believed that only technology and strategy could save lives, began to understand the power of simple human compassion. Even as the virus was slowly brought under control, the humans never celebrated prematurely. They remained vigilant, checking every area, following up on every patient, and ensuring that no one was left behind. They did not see their work as a temporary mission. They saw it as a responsibility. The Valari were beginning to realize that this was the defining trait of the humans, an unshakable sense of duty toward others, even in the most dangerous and uncertain circumstances. By the end of the second part of this story, the Valari had not only begun to recover physically but also emotionally. Hope had returned, stronger than before, because they had seen what humans could do. They had witnessed beings who faced danger head-on, who worked tirelessly without complaint, and who inspired those around them to keep going. The humans had become more than saviors. They had become teachers, guides, and examples of resilience. The Valari began to share their experiences with one another. They spoke of the humans' courage, their determination, and their compassion. They told stories of humans carrying medicine through dangerous districts, comforting the sick and never giving up. Artists painted scenes of humans and Valari working side by side, capturing the energy and spirit of the collaboration. Children learned about the humans as heroes, not through tales of war but through examples of kindness, bravery, and teamwork. Slowly, a new understanding was forming among the Valari. They realized that survival was not just about knowledge, technology, or even skill. It was about heart, will, and the willingness to face impossible odds for the sake of others. And in the humans, they had found a living example of these qualities. The human presence was no longer seen as foreign or strange. They had become part of the Valari world, walking among the people, sharing meals, teaching, and working. The Valari were learning not just how to survive, but how to live again, to hope, to trust, and to act with courage even in the darkest moments. By the end of this period, the Valari were no longer just waiting to be saved. They were participating in their own recovery, guided and inspired by the humans. And the humans, true to their nature, continued to work tirelessly, ready for whatever challenges came next. The bond between the two species was growing, built not on fear or necessity, but on trust, respect, and shared effort. And as the Valari watched the humans move through their cities, solving one problem after another, they began to understand something profound. This was why humans were called Deathworlders, not because they destroyed, but because they survived. And more importantly, they thrived even in conditions that would have destroyed others. The first contact had become more than an emergency response. It had become a lesson in courage, compassion, and the power of determination. And as the Valari continued to recover, they knew that the humans were not just visitors, they were allies, partners, and a sign of hope for the future. When the humans first set foot on Valar Prime, the Valari could hardly believe their eyes. They had imagined visitors from Earth to be fearsome, chaotic, and unpredictable, as the legends across the galaxy suggested. But in reality, the humans were a mix of contradictions. They were strong yet gentle, loud yet precise, rough yet careful. Every human movement seemed simple at first glance, but it carried an energy and purpose that left the Valari watching in awe. The first thing the humans did was assess the situation. They didn't spend days debating or waiting for council approval. They moved quickly, dividing themselves into teams and heading straight to the areas most affected by the virus. Some humans worked in hospitals, organizing patients and distributing medicine. Others went into the streets, helping families trapped in contaminated zones. Their presence immediately changed the atmosphere. For months, the cities had been quiet, almost dead. Now they buzzed with life. The hum of machinery, the chatter of humans and Valari working side by side, the sound of hope returning. It was almost overwhelming. The Valari were cautious at first. Their fear of contamination was deep, and watching the humans navigate streets filled with infection without hesitation was both alarming and fascinating. The humans wore protective gear, yes, but they did not seem afraid. They moved as if danger was something to acknowledge and manage, not something to be paralyzed by. One of the Valari healers, who had spent weeks in quarantine observing the virus spread, realized something important. Fear, when mixed with hesitation, only made things worse. The humans acted with determination, and their confidence was contagious. In one district, the humans faced a particularly difficult challenge. A large building that had served as a Valari medical center had been overrun by the virus. The structure itself was damaged, with collapsed walls and broken support beams. Inside, patients were trapped and alone. The humans did not pause or wait for safer conditions. They entered the building in coordinated teams, carefully navigating the wreckage. The Valari watched in amazement as the humans carried out patients, treated injuries, and neutralized contaminated areas. Every human seemed to know exactly what to do, yet no plan was identical. They improvised constantly, adjusting to the environment, the needs of the patients, and the changing conditions. One of the humans, carrying a small crate of medical supplies, paused to speak to a frightened Valari child. The child had not left her home in weeks, terrified of the virus. The human knelt down, speaking softly in words the Valari could understand, holding the child's hand gently. It was a small gesture, but it left a lasting impression. The Valari realized that survival was not just about medicine and technology. It was also about connection, empathy, and trust. Humans understood this instinctively. The Valari began to interact with the humans more closely. At first they felt awkward and unsure. Humans did not seem to care about rank, status, or appearance. They treated everyone equally. A Valari leader could walk alongside a young healer or even a child, and the human would address them all with the same focus and respect. This was new for the Valari, whose society had always been structured around hierarchy and ceremony. Working with humans, they began to see that cooperation did not require rules or rank. It required trust, effort, and a shared goal. One morning, the humans discovered that a group of infected Valari had been hiding in a collapsed building, afraid to seek help. The humans did not hesitate. They organized a team, carefully entered the building, and brought out each individual safely. They treated the sick on the spot, using simple but effective methods. What struck the Valari most was not the skill of the humans, but their persistence. They refused to leave until every person was accounted for, even when it meant working for hours in dangerous conditions. The Valari were learning quickly. Watching humans adapt to each new problem, they began to see patterns in their methods. Humans were not just reacting. They were planning, improvising, and always thinking a few steps ahead. If one approach failed, they tried another immediately without hesitation or frustration. They celebrated small victories quietly, but never rested until the job was done. As the days passed, the humans and Valari began to work as a team. The Valari contributed their knowledge of the virus and their understanding of the environment. The humans contributed practical solutions, experience in emergencies, and the energy to see plans through. Slowly, districts began to recover. Streets were cleared of debris, hospitals organized, and families reunited. For the first time in months, the Valari cities had life again, not just the appearance of life, but the rhythm of it. Children played in safe areas, parents returned to work, and the sounds of laughter replaced the silence that had dominated for so long. Even when setbacks occurred, the humans remained undeterred. One day, a sudden spike in infections appeared in a district previously considered safe. Some of the Valari were frightened and suggested isolating the area, leaving it for later. The humans refused. They divided into teams, methodically treating patients, setting up temporary care centers, and ensuring that no one was left behind. The Valari watched as the humans worked tirelessly, their energy and focus unwavering even as they faced exhaustion. The Valari began to understand why humans had survived on Earth for so long. Their planet was harsh, filled with predators, diseases, and disasters. Humans had learned to act despite fear, to improvise when conditions were against them, and to care for each other even in danger. These were qualities that the Valari had admired from afar, but had never experienced so closely. Now, seeing humans in action, they could appreciate the depth of these abilities. One of the Valari elders observed a group of humans working in a particularly devastated area. One human was carrying a Valari child on their back, while another human carried medical supplies. A third human coordinated a team, giving clear instructions and encouragement. The elder realized that humans did not just act, they inspired others to act. Their energy and focus spread to those around them. Valari healers who had felt helpless were suddenly motivated to contribute, trying new methods, and working alongside the humans with renewed confidence. At night, the humans did not rest in isolation. They gathered in small groups, sharing stories, plans, and sometimes quiet laughter. They encouraged one another, offering support and comfort. The Valari began to understand the importance of these moments. Humans were not machines, they were alive in every sense. Their ability to recover from emotional and physical strain allowed them to continue working at a pace that the Valari could hardly imagine. In one memorable moment, a human medic approached a Valari family who had lost members to the virus. The human did not speak in complicated scientific terms or try to explain the situation. Instead, they sat with the family, offered food, comfort, and a hand to hold. The family felt seen, understood, and supported. The Valari realized that the human's greatest strength was not technology or medicine, it was the way they cared. As weeks passed, the bond between humans and Valari grew stronger. Trust developed naturally. Valari healers began to follow human methods, not blindly, but understanding the reasoning behind them. Humans taught patience, improvisation, and perseverance in ways that went beyond instructions. They showed that courage was not just facing danger, it was continuing to act for the benefit of others, even when the outcome was uncertain. The Valari also noticed that the humans did not seek praise. They did not ask for recognition or rewards. They were focused entirely on the mission, saving lives and restoring the Valari cities. This humility was striking. In a society where status and achievement were highly valued, the Valari found it difficult to comprehend. Yet the results spoke for themselves. By working alongside humans, the Valari had begun to turn the tide against the virus, slowly reclaiming their homeworld. By the end of this part of the story, the Valari were no longer simply survivors. They were participants in their own recovery, guided by the humans. The streets were safer, hospitals more organized, and the sense of despair that had hung over the cities for months was lifting. The Valari had learned new ways to act, to plan, and to care. They had learned that courage and compassion could coexist, and that determination was often stronger than fear. The humans had changed everything. They had arrived as strangers from a distant world, but they had become teachers, guides, and companions. Their presence had not just saved lives. It had reshaped the Valari perspective on survival, hope, and the power of working together. The Valari could now see that even in the darkest moments, there were beings in the galaxy who would act when others hesitated, and as the Valari watched the humans move through their cities, tirelessly solving one challenge after another, they realized something profound. These Deathworlders from Earth were not just survivors of their own planet. They were a reminder that resilience, courage, and compassion could be found even in the harshest conditions. The humans had arrived to answer a cry for help, and in doing so, they had given the Valari something more precious than medicine or technology, a renewed sense of hope. Even as the humans worked tirelessly, the Valari began to realize that the recovery would not be easy. The virus they faced was relentless, mutating and spreading faster than anyone had predicted. Every day brought new challenges, and even the humans, who had handled disasters on their own planet, faced situations that tested their limits. Yet no matter how difficult the task, the humans did not waver. One morning, a sudden outbreak appeared in a district that had been considered safe. Panic began to rise among the Valari residents. Some wanted to evacuate immediately, fearing contamination and chaos. The humans, however, acted calmly. They quickly assessed the situation, organized teams, and implemented a plan to contain the spread. Their approach was methodical yet flexible. They did not rely on rigid rules or waiting for perfect conditions. They adjusted as the situation changed, improvising where necessary and working with precision. The Valari were astonished. Humans did not let fear dictate their actions. Even when danger was present, they faced it with determination and thoughtfulness. Some Valari began to understand that this was the key to the humans' survival on their own world. Earth was a planet of constant challenges where danger was never far away. Humans had developed the ability to act decisively, even when the outcome was uncertain. It was this courage that had brought them across the stars to help a civilization in desperate need. As the humans worked through the new outbreak, they also displayed an unexpected sense of teamwork. One human would focus on organizing supplies while another treated patients. When obstacles arose, they quickly coordinated their efforts, communicating with simple gestures, clear words, and a shared understanding. The Valari watched as the humans supported one another, helping their teammates when they became exhausted or injured. There was no judgment, no hesitation, only constant movement toward the goal. The humans also taught the Valari a lesson in compassion. In one quarantined area, a Valari elder lay sick and frightened, refusing to cooperate because of fear and despair. A human approached carefully, speaking softly and offering reassurance. They did not scold or demand obedience. Instead, they showed patience and empathy, explaining the treatment step by step and holding the elder's hand throughout the process. Slowly, the elder relaxed, trusting the human enough to accept help. It was a small moment, but it left a lasting impact. The Valari realized that caring deeply for others could inspire cooperation and healing in ways that technology alone could not achieve. While the humans worked, they also faced their own struggles. Some became ill from exposure to the virus despite wearing protective gear, yet they refused to leave until a cure or treatment was administered. When offered the chance to retreat to safer areas, they chose to remain, driven by a sense of responsibility. Their bravery amazed the Valari. In a society that valued intellect and skill above all, the humans' courage to act in the face of personal danger was almost unbelievable. The Valari began to participate more actively alongside the humans. At first they hesitated, unsure of how to act without causing harm, but the humans treated every attempt as valid. Mistakes were corrected gently, instructions were repeated with patience, and encouragement was constant. Slowly, the Valari learned to act without fear, to adapt to unexpected problems, and to trust in their own abilities. The humans were teaching them not just how to survive, but how to face challenges with resilience and determination. During one particularly difficult day, a group of humans discovered a family trapped in a collapsed building. The building had partially caved in due to structural damage, and the family had been hiding in fear for days. The humans did not hesitate. They formed a human chain, moving debris carefully, and slowly reached the trapped Valari. One human carried a frightened child on their back, while another reassured the parents, explaining each step of the rescue. The Valari watched silently, realizing that these actions were more than rescue. They were demonstrations of courage, leadership, and the refusal to leave anyone behind. Over the following weeks, the humans continued to face obstacles, but they always adapted. When supplies ran low, they improvised solutions. When equipment failed, they built new tools from whatever resources were available. Their resilience became contagious. Valari healers who had once felt powerless now worked with confidence, knowing they were supported by humans who would not abandon them. Slowly, districts that had been devastated by the virus began to recover. Streets were cleared, hospitals were organized, and families were reunited. One day, the humans gathered the Valari people together to explain their approach to handling the virus. They spoke simply without complex terms, demonstrating methods clearly and patiently. The Valari watched as humans explained teamwork, hygiene, and the importance of monitoring symptoms. But the humans' most important lesson was not scientific, it was moral. They taught the Valari that every life mattered, no matter how small or weak. That compassion, combined with action, was the key to survival. The Valari began to adopt this philosophy in their daily work. Children who had been afraid to leave their homes ventured out to help, inspired by the humans' bravery. Adults took responsibility for their neighborhoods, organizing volunteer teams and following the methods taught by the humans. Slowly, the Valari society began to heal, not just physically but emotionally. Hope returned. Fear began to fade. The humans, however, never took credit for the progress. They moved from task to task quietly, focusing on what needed to be done next. They encouraged the Valari, taught them practical skills, and shared their own experiences, but never sought recognition or praise. This humility impressed the Valari deeply. In their own society, success was often measured by status or recognition. The humans measured success by the lives saved and the people helped. As the humans continued their work, a new sense of unity emerged among the Valari. They had always valued intelligence, planning, and technology, but now they realized that courage, compassion, and teamwork were equally important. Watching the humans act under pressure, without fear or hesitation, taught them that survival was not just about avoiding danger, it was about facing it with determination and care for others. One evening, a Valari elder observed a group of humans helping a family rebuild their home. The humans worked tirelessly, lifting heavy debris, repairing walls, and cleaning spaces that had been contaminated. The family expressed gratitude, but the humans simply nodded and continued their work. The elder realized that humans did not act for reward or recognition. They acted because it was the right thing to do. Their morality, combined with their resilience, made them extraordinary in ways the Valari had never seen before. The bond between humans and Valari grew stronger each day. Trust developed naturally, built on shared experiences and mutual respect. Valari healers who had once doubted their own abilities began to rely on human guidance, gaining confidence in their skills. The humans encouraged creativity, adaptability, and persistence. They showed that no problem was too large to face, no obstacle insurmountable if approached with determination and care. Even when setbacks occurred, humans remained calm and focused. When new infections appeared, they responded immediately. When supplies ran out, they improvised. When exhaustion threatened to slow their teams, they motivated one another, sharing encouragement and support. Their energy and determination inspired everyone around them, creating a ripple effect that lifted the spirits of the entire Valari population. By the end of this period, the Valari had learned a fundamental truth. Courage, compassion, and determination could achieve what fear and hesitation could not. The humans had arrived as strangers from a distant world, but they had become more than visitors. They were guides, mentors, and examples of resilience. The Valari could see clearly now that even in the darkest moments there were beings in the galaxy willing to act when others would not. The humans had changed the course of Valari society. Not only had they slowed the virus and saved countless lives, but they had also taught the Valari how to act under pressure, how to care deeply, and how to find hope in despair. By working together, the two species had begun to transform the homeworld, creating a society that valued courage, compassion, and unity above all. And as the humans continued to move through the Valari cities, treating the sick, repairing damage, and inspiring those around them, the Valari realized something profound. These Deathworlders from Earth were not just survivors of their own harsh planet. They were beacons of hope, reminders that even in the most dangerous and desperate situations, courage and compassion could prevail. The Valari looked to the stars and felt something they had not experienced in months: hope, trust, and the certainty that, as long as beings like the humans existed, no challenge was too great to overcome. Weeks had passed since the humans first arrived on Valar Prime, and the changes they had brought were now evident everywhere. Streets that had once been empty and silent were now bustling with activity. Hospitals once overwhelmed were now organized and efficient. Families once separated by fear and illness were coming together again. The Valari began to feel a sense of normalcy returning. But it was more than just survival. It was a transformation of their society, led by the courage and determination of the humans. The Valari realized that their own world had been waiting for this kind of energy. Their people had relied on technology, strategy, and careful planning for centuries, but these alone were not enough to face the threat of the virus. The humans had shown them something that no machine, no strategy, and no calculation could provide: resilience born from experience, courage in the face of danger, and a deep sense of responsibility to others. As the humans continued their work, news of their actions began to spread to other parts of the galaxy. The Valari had always been regarded as a fragile, doomed civilization, and many species had refused to help them when the virus first spread. Now reports described a different story. Humans, the so-called Deathworlders, had crossed light years to aid a species in need. They had risked their own lives, faced unknown dangers, and yet they worked with patience, skill, and compassion. The Valari themselves began to see humans differently. They were no longer strange, unpredictable beings from a distant planet. They were heroes, teachers, and partners. The Valari observed the humans closely, noting how they motivated one another, how they worked tirelessly despite fatigue, and how they found creative solutions to impossible problems. One human team had even built a temporary bridge from debris to reach a quarantined area, allowing doctors to transport patients safely. Another team had developed a simple but effective method to purify water contaminated by the virus, preventing further outbreaks. What struck the Valari most was not the humans' knowledge or skills, but their determination. Even when exhausted, even when faced with setbacks, they refused to give up. They encouraged each other, lifted one another's spirits, and continued working until the mission was complete. The Valari began to understand that this was why humans had survived on their own planet for so long. Earth was harsh, unforgiving, and full of challenges, and humans had developed the ability to act decisively, adapt quickly, and care for one another through it all. One morning, the Valari Council called a meeting to discuss the progress of the recovery. The council had been skeptical when the humans first arrived, questioning their methods and doubting their intentions. Now, however, the evidence was undeniable. Entire districts that had been devastated by the virus were recovering. Hospitals were functioning efficiently. Families were returning home. The humans had not only stopped the spread of the disease, but had also taught the Valari how to work together in ways they had never imagined. During the meeting, one of the Valari elders spoke about the humans. "We came to this point relying on technology and fear," they said. "But it was the humans' courage, their willingness to act for the sake of others, that has saved us. They have taught us something we could not have learned alone." The council members nodded in agreement. For the first time, they truly understood what it meant to have allies. Not just friends or neighbors, but beings who would act selflessly to protect and support them. The humans continued to demonstrate this selflessness every day. In one district, a group of human medics discovered a family who had been hiding for days in fear of the virus. The humans did not hesitate. They carefully moved through the area, administering medicine, comforting the frightened family, and ensuring that each member was safe. The Valari watched silently, realizing that the humans' courage was contagious. The family, once paralyzed by fear, began to act as well, helping neighbors and supporting one another. Over time, the Valari began to adopt human methods and philosophy. They learned that survival was not just about avoiding danger. It was about facing it with determination, compassion, and collaboration. They discovered that fear could be managed, that obstacles could be overcome, and that courage could inspire others to act. Humans had shown them that even the most difficult challenges could be approached with patience, creativity, and a willingness to act for the benefit of others. The bond between humans and Valari grew stronger each day. Trust developed naturally, built on shared experiences and mutual respect. Valari healers who had once doubted their own abilities began to rely on human guidance, gaining confidence in their skills. Children who had been afraid to leave their homes ventured out to help, inspired by the humans' bravery. Adults took responsibility for their neighborhoods, organizing volunteer teams and following the methods taught by the humans. Slowly, Valar Prime began to heal, not just physically but emotionally and socially as well. Even when new challenges arose, humans did not falter. When supplies ran low, they found creative solutions. When equipment failed, they built replacements from available resources. When exhaustion threatened their teams, they supported one another, sharing encouragement and offering rest when needed. Their energy and determination spread to those around them, creating a sense of unity and purpose that the Valari had never experienced before. One evening, the Valari observed a human team assisting a group of families in rebuilding their homes. The humans worked tirelessly, lifting debris, repairing walls, and cleaning contaminated areas. They encouraged the Valari to participate, teaching them simple techniques to make the process faster and safer. The Valari were amazed at how the humans combined efficiency with compassion. They worked quickly, but they never overlooked the needs of the people they were helping. Each action was deliberate, thoughtful, and guided by a deep sense of responsibility. The Valari began to tell stories about the humans. Children learned about their courage, creativity, and selflessness. Artists painted murals of humans and Valari working side by side, capturing the spirit of collaboration and hope. Musicians composed songs inspired by the humans' determination and empathy. In every corner of Valar Prime, the story of the humans' arrival and their relentless efforts spread. They had become symbols of resilience, bravery, and the power of compassion. The humans, however, never sought recognition. They did not ask for thanks or praise. They simply continued to act, moving from task to task, solving problems, and inspiring those around them. Their focus was on the mission, not on accolades. The Valari found this humility striking. In their society, success was often measured by status or recognition. The humans measured success by the lives saved and the good done, and that perspective was transforming the Valari way of thinking. As the humans worked, the Valari began to reflect on their own society. They realized that survival required more than intelligence, strategy, and technology. It required courage, compassion, and the willingness to act in the face of uncertainty. Humans had shown them that even the most dangerous challenges could be overcome when individuals worked together, cared for one another, and refused to give up. By the end of this period, the Valari society was changing in ways that went beyond recovering from the virus. The humans had not only saved lives, they had inspired a cultural shift. The Valari were learning to value determination, empathy, and collaboration. They had learned that fear could be managed, that obstacles could be overcome, and that courage could inspire others to act. And as the humans continued their work, quietly moving through the cities, treating patients, rebuilding homes, and teaching the Valari how to care for one another, the Valari realized something profound. These Deathworlders from Earth were not just survivors of their own harsh planet. They were examples of hope, determination, and resilience. They had crossed the galaxy to answer a desperate call, and in doing so, they had changed the future of an entire civilization. The Valari looked around their recovering world with renewed confidence. They had survived the virus, but more importantly, they had learned how to thrive even in the face of danger. And the humans, as always, continued to act without hesitation, without expectation, and without complaint. Their presence had proven something vital. Even in a galaxy that often ignored cries for help, there were beings willing to act when it mattered most. The humans had become more than visitors. They were partners, teachers, and symbols of what could be achieved when courage, compassion, and determination came together. And the Valari knew that as long as beings like these Deathworlders existed, no challenge, no threat, and no darkness would be too great to face. By the time the final phase of the recovery began, the Valari cities were no longer the empty, silent places they had once been. Streets were alive again with activity, markets reopened, children played under the sun, and the familiar hum of daily life returned. The virus that had threatened to destroy their civilization was no longer an unstoppable force. Thanks to the humans, the Valari had not only survived, they were rebuilding, stronger than before. Yet the humans themselves showed no signs of slowing down. Even as the Valari celebrated small victories, the humans continued to move tirelessly through the cities, helping wherever they were needed. They were a constant presence, always ready to act, always willing to adapt. Their energy and determination had become a steady rhythm that the Valari had come to rely on. The humans had taught them a lesson that no technology or plan could provide, that hope could be restored through action, courage, and the willingness to care for others, no matter the risks. The Valari observed as humans worked not just with precision but with empathy. One day, a human medic sat with a Valari teenager who had lost their family to the virus. The teenager was silent, withdrawn, afraid to speak. The human did not rush them, did not push them to answer questions. Instead, they sat quietly, offering comfort through gestures, patience, and small acts of care. Slowly, the teenager began to respond, their fear easing with each passing moment. The Valari realized that the human strength was not just physical or technical, it was emotional. They knew how to heal hearts as well as bodies. In other areas, humans led groups to rebuild homes and infrastructure. They lifted heavy debris, repaired damaged buildings, and restored clean water and energy systems. The Valari, who had always relied on machines and technology, were surprised at how effective these simple hands-on solutions could be. Humans combined practicality with determination, thinking on their feet, improvising when necessary, and never giving up until the work was done. Their presence had become a model of resilience for the Valari people, who were learning to act with confidence and courage themselves. The humans also shared knowledge in subtle but profound ways. They did not lecture or demand obedience. They demonstrated through action, showing the Valari how to solve problems creatively, how to work efficiently, and how to act decisively in moments of uncertainty. The Valari began to notice that the humans' true power lay not in their technology or their survival skills, but in their mindset. They approached every challenge with a sense of responsibility, courage, and care for others. As the recovery progressed, the Valari began to organize themselves differently. Inspired by the humans, they formed volunteer groups to assist in the remaining affected areas. Communities came together, learning to collaborate and act quickly without waiting for permission or instructions. Families who had lived isolated and fearful for months now worked side by side with humans and neighbors alike. Hope was no longer just a word. It was visible in the streets, in the laughter of children, and in the determination of adults rebuilding their world. One of the most remarkable transformations took place in the hearts of the Valari themselves. They had lived for generations in fear of danger, relying on caution and isolation to survive, but watching humans face risk without hesitation, taking action when others might hesitate, taught them a new kind of courage. Valari healers who had been timid or unsure now treated patients confidently, using the methods they had learned from humans. Parents who had been afraid to leave their homes ventured into the streets to help others. Even the youngest children began to take small, meaningful actions, inspired by the humans' example. The humans, despite being strangers from a distant world, had become a part of Valari society. They were trusted guides, teachers, and companions. The Valari no longer saw them as outsiders or unusual visitors. They were friends who had risked everything to help a civilization in need. The relationship had changed the Valari culture itself. Where there had once been fear, there was now courage. Where there had once been despair, there was hope. And where there had once been isolation, there was collaboration and unity. One memorable day, a group of humans organized a community event to celebrate the progress made so far. They invited Valari families, healers, and children to participate. There were games for the children, workshops demonstrating practical skills, and discussions about continued safety and health practices. The humans did not take credit. They simply facilitated the gathering, creating an atmosphere of learning, joy, and shared accomplishment. The Valari were amazed. They realized that these humans had not just saved lives. They had restored a sense of community, a feeling of belonging and connection that had been lost for far too long. Even in the quiet moments, the humans left a lasting impression. They would sit with the elderly, offering company and conversation. They would help rebuild small homes without expectation of thanks. They comforted the frightened and inspired the hesitant. Every act, no matter how small, reinforced a simple but powerful truth. Caring for others, acting with courage, and refusing to give up could create real, lasting change. By now, the Valari could see the results everywhere. Cities were thriving, families had returned to normal routines, hospitals operated efficiently, and no area remained neglected. The virus, once a terrifying and unstoppable force, was under control. The Valari had survived, and in many ways they had thrived, and all of this was possible because of the humans' guidance, courage, and determination. The Valari elders convened one final council meeting to discuss the impact of the humans. The council reflected on everything that had happened. The arrival of the humans, the desperate situation they faced, the lessons learned, and the progress achieved. They acknowledged that the humans had done more than any Valari could have imagined. Not only had they slowed the virus and saved lives, but they had also transformed the society itself, teaching values and methods that would shape Valari culture for generations to come. One elder spoke for the group. "We came to the edge of despair. We feared extinction. And then the humans arrived, not seeking reward, not seeking recognition, but simply to act, to help, to save. They have given us more than life. They have given us hope, courage, and a future worth fighting for. Their actions have changed us forever." The council members nodded in agreement. It was clear that the humans' impact would not be forgotten. The humans, however, remained humble. They did not attend the council meeting seeking praise. They simply listened, offered guidance for continued rebuilding, and prepared for the next steps in their mission. Their focus was always on action, not recognition. The Valari understood that this humility was a fundamental part of what made humans so remarkable. They did not act for glory. They acted because it was necessary, because it was the right thing to do, and because they refused to abandon those in need. As the last of the critical recovery efforts concluded, the humans prepared to return to their own world. The Valari had begun to take full responsibility for the ongoing rebuilding and care of their society. Yet the farewell was bittersweet. Humans had become friends, guides, and companions. Their presence had been a constant source of inspiration, and their absence would be deeply felt. On the final day, the humans walked through the streets of Valor Prime one last time. Children waved, families expressed gratitude, and healers shared stories of the lessons they had learned. The humans smiled, nodded, and quietly acknowledged the progress made. They had come across the galaxy to help, and now, having achieved their mission, they prepared to leave, leaving behind a stronger, more resilient Valari civilization. As the humans boarded their ships, the Valari watched them with admiration and respect. They understood that the humans had risked everything for a species that was not their own. They had crossed light years of space to answer a desperate plea for help, demonstrating courage, determination, and compassion in every action. The Valari realized that these Deathworlders from Earth were not only survivors, they were beacons of hope in a galaxy that often ignored cries for help. After the ships departed, the Valari took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. Their society had faced near destruction, yet it had survived and begun to thrive again. They had learned lessons that no book, no teacher, and no technology could have provided. Courage, empathy, and determination had become central to their way of life. The humans had shown them that even in the darkest moments, hope could be restored through action and care for others. And as the Valari rebuilt their cities, nurtured their communities, and taught the next generation the values they had learned from humans, they carried a profound truth with them. In a galaxy that often turned a blind eye, there were beings who would answer a desperate call for help, who would act when others hesitated, and who would change the fate of entire civilizations through courage, compassion, and determination. The humans had left, but their legacy remained. Velar Prime was alive again, stronger and more united than ever. The Valari had survived not just because of technology or planning, but because they had been inspired by a species that had mastered survival, resilience, and empathy in ways they had never imagined. And for the first time in generations, the Valari could look to the stars with hope, knowing that even in the darkest,